Throughout the history of video game consoles, there have been many iconic and nostalgia-inducing startup screens. You have the oddly menacing startup screen of the PS2 that immediately pulls you in with these dissonant, droning synths that almost implies that what you're about to experience is something larger than life. It imposes a sense of stature. This opening perfectly represents the dominance that the PS2 would have over the video game industry. This sound represents the peak of PlayStation. I know it, you know it, and it knows it, and it takes full advantage. Meanwhile, the Game Boy Color is the polar opposite of the PS2 visually and auditory by giving us nothing more than the simple white screen, backed up by some colored text and that trademark simple and clean memorable jingle that Nintendo is renowned for. But if I personally had to pick one console startup that has solidified itself in gaming history as one of the most iconic and memorable startup screens ever made, without question has to be the... I think I can confidently say that this startup screen has practically ingrained itself into the minds and culture of gamers over the last 2 decades and has managed to set itself apart despite its age. For me and many others, I'm sure this startup screen represents the innocence and joy of childhood. It represents a simpler time in which you could disconnect and get lost in the worlds that the GameCube offered you, and not having to worry about the pressures that life presents you. If you grew up with the GameCube as I did, then this screen will most likely take you back to an array of memories with various games, the mindset and the feelings you had as a child. The power of nostalgia is something special, and very few things are more nostalgic for me than the GameCube. The excitement of watching a startup screen and knowing you were most likely about to experience something special is unmatched in today's console space, and in my mind, there's no greater example of this than the GameCube. And I mean, also, come on, you can't deny that this loading screen easily has the best meme potential out of all of them, and is probably one of the main reasons that the GameCube has stayed relevant for as long as it has. Honestly, I don't think Nintendo could have made a better visual representation for the GameCube than he did with this. And also, on a side note, I just realized that the purple cubes they animated for the opening look very similar to the GameCube itself. Captain Obvious, I know. Anyways, with all this being said, if the GameCube was so great, then why is it one of Nintendo's lowest selling consoles of all time, and how could it have changed Nintendo forever as the title suggests? Well, here's hoping you stick around for my analysis, so let's talk about it. Also, I apologize in advance for this, but I need to appease my YouTube overlords, aka the algorithm, so please consider subscribing to my channel. I would appreciate it very much. Now with the shilling out of the way, let's talk about how the GameCube changed Nintendo forever. Roll the music. The year is 1998, and a company named ArtX, who previously worked with Nintendo on the graphics chip for the Nintendo 64, were now beginning development on a project codenamed Project Flipper, which will later go on to be the graphics processor for the Nintendo GameCube. 1 year later, Nintendo officially announces their 6th generation console, aptly codenamed Project Dolphin, and were giving development kits to their subsidiary game studios, such as Rare and Retro Studios, and formed a partnership with IBM, who later went on to create the GameCube CPU known as the Gecko. The console was officially named the GameCube at a Japanese press conference on August 25th, 2000, and later revealed their software lineup for the console at E3 2001, which included games like Luigi's Mansion and Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader. The GameCube officially launched in Japan on September 14th, 2001, and approximately 500,000 units were shipped to retailers and was scheduled to launch just 2 months following the Japanese launch on November 5th, but was pushed back in an effort to increase the number of overall available units, and officially launched in the US on November 18th with over 700,000 units shipped this time around. So at this point, you're probably wondering how the console sold in its overall lifespan, and it maybe kinda sorta potentially is one of their worst selling consoles to date. Let's talk about that. But before I talk about what caused the GameCube to fail financially, however, I first want to go over what the GameCube did right. And we can't really talk about the GameCube without talking about the controller. So what is it specifically about the GameCube controller that causes it to be so beloved and appreciated by gamers almost universally, and why is it the main choice of controller for Smash Bros. Players? Well, for one, the GameCube controller holds a lot of nostalgic value for a lot of Smash players, particularly those who've sunk tons of hours into playing competitive Melee and have years worth of muscle memory locked into the controller because of their time playing Melee. There is also a factor of having a slight competitive edge in using the controller by way of having low latency, as well as the octagonal guide around the left joystick, which is very useful for performing inputs and precise movements in Melee, which happens to be one of the most technically demanding games of recent memory. While talking about the controller, I feel as though I should probably mention the snappy but responsive nature of the left joystick, which is pretty important for fighting game fans, especially since the joystick resets to neutral fairly quickly after being used, which can be key for performing combos and preventing misinputs. Great, so the controller's layout and engineering makes the controller satisfying to use, as well as being the primary controller for the majority of Smash Bros. Players. But what's the real reason the GameCube controller has remained relevant for this long? Well, you see... Ah yes, what many people consider to be the GameCube's magnum opus. While arguably not being the best the console had to offer, Melee is definitely the most important and impactful to the gaming industry as a whole. Again, the main reason the GameCube controller has managed to outlive the console itself is without question thanks to Melee and its longevity as a competitive fighting game. Melee is extremely important to the narrative here because it built the foundations for the entire Smash Bros. Series, as well as spawning its own subgenre of fighting games known as the platform fighter, and has even gone on to inspire multiple successful franchises such as Brawlhalla and Rivals of Aether, just to name a few. It's honestly a miracle that Melee has managed to stay relevant for as long as it has, still bringing in new players and competitors despite there being well over 19 years of meta to catch up on. Competition for this game always stays hot and makes it interesting to watch to this day. Dude, Sakurai even claimed that Melee was his best work to date, despite having had already released Brawl, which truly speaks volumes about how sharp of a gameplay experience it truly is, and has still gone relatively untouched, despite there being 3 new entries to the series since its release. I always give Sakurai much love and respect for the work he does on these games, but I think a true testament to that man's character is Melee's existence in general. He developed a whole new Smash game on a new console within a 12-month development cycle, which is still insane to think about, honestly. To quote a Google review I found a few minutes ago, Super Smash Bros. Melee is a beautiful accident in the form of a video game. Though the game's developers designed the game as a party game you can play with your friends, the sheer number of hidden techniques that people have discovered over the years would make it seem quite the opposite of what a party game is. The game is easy to pick up, but the skill ceiling is limitless. Even veterans who have been playing for years can learn or pull off something they've never done before and adapt it to their playstyle. You know what, honestly? Couldn't have said it better myself, Herman. Thank you. However, we probably shouldn't go on talking about the GameCube without mentioning the rest of its library. So, how is the GameCube's library really? It's pretty alright. Mario Kart Double Dash, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Mario the F-Zero Door, Luigi's Metroid Prime series. We can't talk about the GameCube's library without mentioning the real magnum opus. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, baby! Woo! Guys, have you heard about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat? Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat! It's Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Mad props to Nintendo for making this truly innovative masterpiece that is extremely underrated. You play the game by beating the shit out of the Donkey Kong drums, bro. It's fucking genius, guys. Scratch everything I just said. It all doesn't matter. This probably should have been an entire video about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat anyways. I could have easily made a 4-hour video about it, and that's honestly just being kind of generous. No, but seriously, the GameCube has a fantastic library with tons of hidden gems to boot. My personal favorites being Mario Sunshine, which if you haven't seen any of my recent streams, know that I am very good at, and I'm currently shooting for the worst speedrun of all time, and honestly, I might get that achievement at this rate. List of favorites also including Sonic Adventure 2, NBA Street Volume 2, and yes, obviously I'm a proud Shaq main, so don't ask, Mario Kart Double Dash, Melee, and Sonic Heroes. Nintendo is typically known for innovating on the hardware aspect of their consoles that give them their unique flavor in my opinion, but the GameCube is the complete opposite of that, and you can tell they put all of their focus in making unique and interesting games that push the boundaries of what Nintendo games could be. Not to mention, a lot of the GameCube titles set the standards for a lot of their series, such as the Mario sports games, Melee, and the Thousand Year Door for example. The GameCube iterations of these series by many are considered to be the high point of these series, and again, still set the standard for their future iterations as well. So on paper, it seemed like Nintendo had their work cut out for them. So why did the GameCube flop? Well, one of the biggest reasons most people cite as the GameCube's Achilles heel is the lack of third-party support. If you paid attention to any of the games I listed earlier, you'll notice a lot of the premier titles are primarily first-party games. But why did the GameCube have such a strong lack of third-party support? Well, see, the main issue lies in Nintendo's choice in using mini DVDs as their primary format for developing games. Meanwhile, Microsoft and Sony were using real DVDs and could actually play normal DVDs on their consoles. This fact alone killed almost any third-party support the GameCube could have had, since the standard for developing games at the time was normal DVDs. Microsoft and Sony essentially killed the GameCube by having a superior disc format and were just selling better hardware in general. So the last reason I want to bring up is that Nintendo did a horrible job at marketing the GameCube, which is highly unfortunate as they marketed it to a primarily child-focused audience, which also killed any potential customers the GameCube could have had. Nintendo is clearly at their best when they're innovating in the hardware space and are taking a leap forward by being the most creative developer out there. Some people get frustrated with Nintendo due to their consoles usually being less powerful than their competitors, to which I say, remember the GameCube, which was just that. A normal, decently powerful console for the time, and is still considered a commercial flop. But why? Because the GameCube's hardware and design doesn't challenge the status quo in the video game industry. But how did the GameCube change Nintendo as a company forever? The GameCube changed Nintendo forever because Nintendo learned a valuable lesson and realized that they need to market to a different audience than their competitors in order to make a profit. And following the GameCube's failure, Nintendo did just that. They created what would soon be their most lucrative piece of hardware in a very long time.
Here comes the money.
Nah, I'm just kidding, we're not doing that anymore. But Nintendo took the lessons they learned from the GameCube's failure and made the Wii, which as we all know would go on to be one of the company's highest selling consoles in its history. I'm sure Nintendo considers the GameCube to be a failure, and while it did flop commercially, I think any Nintendo fan who owned the GameCube was probably extremely satisfied with it and made some amazing memories with it that will live on with us for the rest of our lives. To quote my man Herman one last time, the GameCube truly is a messy masterpiece.